Some business owners believe that personal, financial, and estate planning are closely tied to business planning, and some don't. Which side are you on? Stay tuned, we just might change your mind. Hi, I'm Norman A. Hood, financial advisor and host of the Exit Plan Show. I interview America's top advisors to help business owners enjoy more freedom, grow companies faster, and retire on their own terms. I'm here again with Tom Baer, CPA and Certified Exit Planner from Springfield, Illinois, wrapping up his series of appearances on the show with episode 13, the final step of the 7-step exit planning process, personal wealth and estate planning. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Norm. I wonder if there's some significance to this being episode 13.
Maybe it's our lucky day. Maybe it's your lucky day.
Right.
Okay, we're going to talk about the 5 really key points to tying this into the rest of your exit plan. First of all, you normally would think of selling your business and then doing some estate planning, but there's actually some stuff that should go on pre-sale. And then the other question is, you all of a sudden have all this money, how much do you want, and how much do you want to earmark for your heirs? And you need to balance, when you're talking about heirs, you need to balance between assets now or assets later. And again, we revisit this topic of business active versus non-business active. And then more important, this is a big payday for you, and it's also a big payday for Uncle Sam. So you need to look at some tax techniques. First of all, let's talk about pre-sale. What should people take into account maybe ahead of the actual sale or company when it comes to estate planning?
Well, a couple things come to mind, Norm. One is segregation of your assets. If you're a very, very common structure with a business we might work with would be to have the real estate owned outside of the business in an LLC. Mm-hmm. So, that would, if that's not the case, that might be something we want to try to achieve. The other issue that I think you want to deal with is who is the owner of the business. If you have a business that you're going to sell to a third party and there's a tremendous amount of value in it, and when I say a lot of value, let's just use the number of 10 million again. Excuse me, Norm, because 10 million is about what for a husband and wife, what the estate tax exemption would be. So, if it's gonna create an estate tax situation where now you have an estate that's worth in excess of the combined exemption that you and your spouse have, you might want to think about starting to gift some of the stock in the business to family members that you intend to gift proceeds to, because you can use the power of discounting to make a gift of $1 be less than $1, because you can discount the value of that minority interest in your business, sometimes pretty significantly. And let's just say maybe that $1 of stock value that you gifted is really only worth 60 cents. So even though the majority sale of the business is going to generate dollar for dollar, a minority interest in that business gifted to your children may go a long way in minimizing your estate taxes.
Okay, good. As a business owner, how do they decide if they're going to leave money to their heirs, which is normally their children? How do they decide how much? And
well, that's a great question. And remember, in step 2, we talked about the value of the business and really the value of their estate overall, and how much wealth have they accumulated both within and outside the business. And really, that's really a critical question we need to answer here before we start talking about how we divvy up the proceeds from the sale of business. Because clearly we want our client to enjoy retirement and have the necessary resources to be able to do what they hope to do in the later years of their life. So I think that's probably the number one question we would ask, is when they start talking about gifting and allocation to their children and so forth, is let's make sure we take care of you first.
Okay. Sometimes you might use maybe a certified financial planner, help them model that. And
Absolutely, absolutely. And you look at, obviously where do you deploy the assets, and what types of investments, and what type of cash flow do you need from those investments. And so that gets into a lot of certified financial planner type areas where they start looking at asset allocation and risk and all those kinds of things.
Okay, good. And in terms of balancing gifts now and later, I mean, I've had clients say, well, I'd like to leave, let my kids have some money now while I'm still around, see them enjoy it, and they can use it more now when they're younger and have needs and that sort of thing. How do you balance that between something now or versus too much now, and maybe everything at the end when you're no longer around?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, and the question you as a parent, if it's your children, have to ask is are they responsible enough to be able to handle the wealth? And it's not a criticism of your children, but it's just a reality. And maybe you can remember back when you were younger, and if you think about maybe your father or mother would have left you a significant amount of wealth, were you responsible enough to really handle that and manage that wealth and not just go do something silly with it? So again, I think you have to explore that with the client, the business owner, and his spouse, and really try to determine whether or not they have responsible enough heirs to get the money now. And if they don't, then there's lots of good estate planning attorneys out there that can help you put the tools in place, the trust agreements and the family limited partnerships, and put those tools in place so that your kids or your heirs are going to be successful, and you're going to feel good about how you structured those assets.
Okay, so everybody's situation is probably different.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right, and now we'll revisit this in conjunction with the business active, non-business active child. So you mentioned that normally you would transfer business assets to the business active child, and so does it ever happen where you do that now because they're actively involved in a business? And then as far as the non-business active children, do you take care of them at the same time, or you do it at the end, or maybe there aren't enough assets? So how do you reconcile all that?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting questions is if you've got a son or daughter that's in the business and has been in the business for a while before they actually get any equity ownership, the real interesting question is how much of the increase in value in the business were they responsible for? Mm-hmm. And are they really creating value that they're later on going to have to purchase? Mm-hmm. And those are really difficult issues to deal with, but again, I would go back to what I've said several times, which is the business owner with his advisors really needs to sit down and think about those issues and come up with the right answer. And there's no right or wrong answer to that, but you got to come up with what do you believe is fair, mm-hmm. and listen to the advice of your advisors and try to reconcile all that. But I would repeat what I've said before about the non-active children in the business. We probably don't want those children to have ownership in the business. Mm-hmm. So now, if the children that are active in the business get a piece of the business, and that means that they're actually getting some liquidity because it's a flow-through entity, for mm-hmm. example, and the non-active children are left with life insurance, let's say. That creates a different dynamic, and you need to address that because mm-hmm. the life insurance isn't liquid until the event of death occurs. So, again, there's a question of fairness there.
Yeah, and disharmony.
And you certainly don't want to create that.
And have you been involved with families and family meetings where they actually sit down and talk to their kids about all this stuff? Or I know I hear about that. I just wonder how common it is.
Not a lot. One of the things when we get into a family business and those dynamics are apparent, one of the things I try to do is make sure that before we bring the heirs into the picture, that we've clearly defined and really vetted the business owner's wishes.
Okay.
Because, you know, ultimately, I think they really need to make the big decisions. And, you know, do they go back after meetings I have with them and talk to their kids? They probably do, but I think it clouds the issue a lot more if you bring all the children in and you start trying to make these decisions. So I really try to encourage my clients, let's go through a process and try to make these decisions, and then let's introduce the decisions you've made to your children as your wishes. You know, that generally will work fine.
So let's say you have a business owner and a spouse, and how important is it to, even though the spouse is not involved in the business, how important is it to get them involved in this issue of fairness and equality with the kids?
I think it's really important for both spouses to talk through this, because again, you brought up the issue earlier of family disharmony. So I think husband or wife, whichever one's the business owner, has to bring the other spouse into the conversation when it involves the family. So, you know, I do think that you know, a lot of times that's a really important fact. Now, in terms of the business, some businesses, the spouse isn't really that involved in the business. So, you know, in some cases, it may not make sense to bring them into the exit planning discussion until a certain point in time when we start talking about the step 7 issues, which is, you know, how are we gonna treat the family, and we've got children that are active and children that aren't active, and so really coming up with a plan that we feel comfortable with. That's the point, I think, when you need to get the spouse involved.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then last on our item, or on our agenda right now, is tax techniques. And I mean, there've got to be ways to reduce the tax impact. Any off the top of your head?
Well, you know, there's so many tools out there from an estate planning standpoint, and, you know, I think you've got to uncover the critical objectives of each business owner, each case, and you've got to try to find the right tools to fit their needs, and, you know, really having a good estate planning attorney, and in a CPA, a financial advisor that's well versed in estate planning on the team is really a critical part of that, you know, because they may have charitable interests, and so you may want to implement like a charitable remainder trust. So a lot of those tools are somewhat complex, and they're not familiar to the average business owner, so you really need to have the right experts in place to help you through that.
Okay. So maybe in a future episode we'll have an estate tax attorney on board here, and we'll talk about some of those kind of more advanced techniques that are in the realm of legal planning. Okay, well, we appreciate everyone being here today, and let Tom wrap this up. All seven steps. He's been with us from the beginning, so we're just going to let you close everything out for us.
Well, you know, I probably go back to step 1 where we talked about who, how much, and when, and you know, step 7 is really about how much, and it's about the assets that you've accumulated, both business and non-business assets. How are you going to manage those tax efficiently, and then what's going to happen to those assets after you pass? And you know, there's a lot of planning that needs to go into that, and you need to really think about making your heirs successful based on their personalities. So you may have several kids, and each one you may structure their inheritance differently based on what you believe they can responsibly manage.
Okay, I think that's a good summary. So once again, if you like today's show, go to exitplanshow.tv and let us know in the comments section. And while you're there, you're going to find all of Tom's contact information, his phone number, his email address, his company website. If you need to get in touch with him, I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. And don't forget to visit our website again, please, and leave your comments and questions below the show notes. Then join us next time for a new guest, when we'll also expand our schedule to Wednesdays and Fridays of each week. And again, thanks, Tom, for all your help. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.